This Necromancer build is the easiest build that you can go to destroy everything while standing still. Even if you have hundreds of minions on you, you will not die. You have a regenerating shield that does not break, and you can lower the cooldown of your shield so quickly that you can have your shield up all the time. I guarantee you that you will never die again with this build, and you will be able to clear high tier dungeons that are way beyond your level that you could not clear before. Hello, welcome back or welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over another Necromancer build that I came up with. I've had a lot of trial and error with this build, and at first I could not make it work, but now I finally have figured it out, and this build I honestly think is completely foolproof. This build is so easy and it's so tanky to the point that it's almost impossible to fail with it. And for those that really love having their big buddy golem by their side, don't worry, I have you covered. This build does have golem in it. As always, I'm going to start off with the legendary items because I believe legendary aspects make or break a build or shape your skills. So let's get into it. The most important legendary aspect you're going to want that makes this whole entire build is this one. Each time that Bone Storm damages an enemy, gain a barrier equal to 5% of your base life for 10 seconds. The next important one you're going to want is this one. Bone Storm and Blood Wave are also darkness skills, deal shadow damage and gain additional effects. Enemies damaged by Bone Storm take shadow damage over 2 seconds, and the Blood Wave doesn't really matter. We're going to be using Bone Storm. This is an amazing unique glove to have, so instead of detonating immediately, your Corpse Explosion summons a volatile skeleton that charges at a random enemy and explodes. Corpse Explosion's damage is increased by 36%. Because we're going to be having constant barriers, you're going to want this one. Deal 22% increased damage while you have a barrier active, and because we're going to be standing still a lot, this one will be also good, so deal 5% increased damage for each second when you stand still, up to 30%. This build barely uses any essence as well, so this is going to be a really good. Skills deal up to 90% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resource, which is your essence. We're going to be going a shadow build, so this item is going to be really good. Each time the Shadow Blight key passive deals damage to enemies, it increases the next Shadow Blight's damage within 10 seconds by 26%, stacking up to 5 times. Now, I don't have all the legendary items found, and some of them I did have, but I got rid of them. So on the screen, I'm going to show you all the legendary aspects that I highly recommend you going with this build. You can pause the video or take a screenshot of all these aspects. You can mix and play with all these legendary aspects. They're all good with this build. It's going to be a little bit hard to fit in everything because, you know, you don't have all the slots, but I highly recommend just playing around and experimenting. Let's next go into the Book of the Dead, and starting with the Skeleton Warriors, I sacrificed them, and I would sacrifice the Reaper one, so you deal 15% increased shadow damage, but you can no longer raise Skeletal Warriors. The next one is Skeletal Mages, and I sacrificed the Cold Mages, so we deal 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, but you can no longer raise Skeletal Mages. And for the Golem, I went the Blood Golem, and this one, while healthy, your Blood Golem gains 25% damage reduction and 50% increased damage. With this build, you're always going to be full HP because your barrier is going to keep you up alive, and so we're going to have this damage reduction and damage increase up all the time. We also don't really have any healing for our Golem in this build, so having Blood Golem passive healing when you cast his ability is going to be amazing. There is also the Iron Golem that everyone loves, and you can spec into it where your Iron Golem slams attacks also make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. However, we're going to be having a skill that applies vulnerable all the time, so we won't need this. And as for Bone Golem, we don't need Bone Golem because we're so tanky, we don't really need the Bone Golem to taunt for us. Editing Lumi here, I completely forgot to mention that Bone Storm works on your Bone Golem, so you can have 2 Bone Storms going on at the same time, which is why we have Golem in this build. For the skill tree, I'm going to run through it a little bit differently. At first, I'm just going to show you very quickly what I have, and then I'll just explain by jumping around like how everything works together. I'm just going to quickly scroll through the skill tree, pause the video, slow down the video, do what you need to do to have a good look at the build. I'll explain all of this very soon. So there you go. Now obviously Bone Storm is the main ability that we have that gives us a shield, so we're going to go that and the passives. We're going to also go the Shadow Blight build because we have a lot of shadow damage, and our Bone Storm is now shadow damage because of our legendary item turning into a shadow. Because we have no minions, we're going to get standalone and this other passive, so our sacrifice is more stronger, and we're going to make our Golem more tankier with this. Now over here we're going to be maxing out all the darkness passives because we're going to be doing a lot of darkness damage, duh. In order for us to lower the cooldown of our Bone Storm, we're going to want Decrepify. Decrepify can reduce the damage you take and slow the enemy, and you have this passive over here, so lucky hit. Enemies hit while afflicted with Decrepify have up to 50% chance to reduce your active cooldown by 1 second. For us to proc this Decrepify constantly, we're going to want Corpse Explosion. Because it's AoE and is very spammable, each minion that you hit with it is going to proc its own lucky hit, so we're going to constantly get the cooldown reduction from Decrepify. Now because we're going down the darkness path, we're obviously going to take this passive which turns a Corpse Explosion into a darkness damage over time. Now we're obviously obviously going to need corpses to spawn from somewhere, so we're going to take this passive, lucky hit, your damage has up to 12% chance to create a corpse at the target's location. Which is also why we're going to take Reap as a basic ability, and we're going to take the passive that lets us form a corpse when we hit an enemy. You're going to want to take passives that increase your tankiness or your damage dealt, so like this one increases your damage when you consume a corpse, this one increases your damage and increases your tankiness when you have enemies close by, this one increases your damage on cursed enemies. For the other skill, we're going to want Corpse Tendril so we can pull in enemies and we can make them vulnerable with this passive. I was pretty jumpy and all over the place with the skills, so I'm gonna go over it again very quickly and summarize everything. So to start off, we have Bone Storm because it gives us a shield. It has a high cooldown, so we're going to want to reduce that cooldown. Decrepify is going to be our tool that reduces the cooldown, and to proc Decrepify constantly, we're going to want a spammable AoE ability, which is Corpse Explosion. For us to get Corpse Explosion, we're going to need corpses, which is going to be this passive and this Reap ability. Now, because we're generating so many corpses, Corpse Tendrils is an amazing ability to have. It can pull in enemies, it can stun them, and it can apply vulnerability, which is amazing for us. The closer the enemies are, it's going to be more easier for us to proc our Corpse Explosion. The cooldown reduction of Decrepify can also apply to your Golem, so you can spam your Golem's ability, which is also why I'm going Blood Golem, so it can constantly heal itself. Now, because we're doing a lot of shadow damage, we're going to obviously take Shadow Blight, and for the passives, we're going to take anything that makes us tankier or more stronger. So for the Paragon Board, you can spec into it however you like, depending on if you want to do more damage or if you want to have more tankiness. I want a mixture of tankiness and damage because I personally cannot stand dying, so I feel like I need some tankiness, but the more I play with this build, the more I feel like I don't really need as much tankiness and I can get away with more damage. So if you want to go more damage, then go for it. So for the first build, I went the more tankier route. If you want to do more damage, you quite literally just go the opposite way. For the first Glyph socket, we went Territorial, and that's because it gives us extra damage to close enemies. We also gain 10% damage reduction against close enemies, and for every 5 dexterity purchase within range, you deal 4% increased damage to close targets. This is obviously really good because we're going to be standing still, we're going to be surrounded by lots of monsters, so we're going to be doing extra damage to close targets, and we're going to be taking less damage from those monsters. So for the second board, I went a more damage route. So the legendary node I took was Wither. Your shadow damage over time effects have a 5% chance to deal 50% bonus damage each time they deal damage. This chance is increased by 1%, and bonus damage is increased by 2.5% for each 50 willpower you have. If you wanted to go a more tankier route, I would suggest going this one, which is Sense of Death. With at least 2 corpses nearby, you gain 15% damage reduction. With no corpses nearby, you deal 15% increased damage. And there's some more tanky type of like notes in here, so if you want to go more tanky, this is the one I suggest. So with this shadow board, I did not rotate it at all, and I just went straight down the middle, trying to catch all the rare notes that I can get. I don't really feel like I need shadow resistance, so I'm not going to get gloom, so I'm just going to skip out on this one. For the rest of these rare notes, essentially you pretty much get like extra free damage or like some more tankiness, so we love that, and all of them are pretty good. For the second Glyph socket, I went the darkness one because it gives us extra shadow damage, which is really lovely. Also, for every 5 willpower purchase within range, you deal plus 2% increased shadow damage, which is really good for us. It obviously makes sense. Also, if the requirements are met, whenever you or your minions deal shadow damage to an enemy, that enemy deals 2% reduced damage up to 10% for 5 seconds, so that makes us more tankier, so we love that for us. So that's my Paragon board so far for this build, and I just want to remind you that we cannot crit on damage over time, so there's no point in getting crit chance or crit strike. So that's pretty much the gist of the build, and you can see in my gameplay footage that my Bone Storm's cooldown is going down so quickly, especially when I'm versing lots of monsters where I can get my lucky hit AoE moment going on. And it's not even just Bone Storm's cooldown, you can see every single one of my cooldowns is getting reduced so quickly, even my dashing, so you can see that I'm like hopping around all over the place. You can see that we're so tanky with our Bone Shield, so we never die. Honestly, the only way you ever die is if you get crowd controlled, which is why getting the Unstoppable legendary aspect on your boots might be worth considering. You can see that we have a lot of AoE damage with our Corpse Explosion, and in fact all our abilities do AoE damage, which is amazing. And we can apply Shadow Blight really quickly because of our AoE Darkness damage. The Darkness AoE damage applies to each monster, and each monster's individual Shadow Blight counts towards Shadow Blight's tick rate. Now I will say this build obviously shines more in an AoE scenario when you're fighting a lot of mobs. In a bossing scenario, it's not completely bad, but it is obviously a lot more slower or weaker than your other builds. That's just because it's going to be harder for us to generate our corpses because we rely on the lucky hit mechanic. So unless you're versing a boss that summons a lot of minions, it's going to be hard for us to proc the corpses on a single target. By no means is it impossible to beat a boss, but it is going to be a little bit slower. And because all our abilities are AoE damage, we don't really have a lot of things for single target damage. I would say that the only way a Necromancer that is going the shadow path could possibly do a lot of single target damage is if they they were to go a minion build, which by the way, I will be making another Necromancer summoner build going down the shadow path, so stay tuned for that. Despite lacking some single target damage, it is more than made up for with the amount of tankiness that you get, the AoE damage you get, honestly just like how easy the build is to use. When I was playing my summoner build and I was trying to clear higher tier dungeons, my minions were constantly dying no matter how much damage reduction I got on it or how much healing I tried to do. It was impossible to keep them alive. And as some of you might have experienced, when your minions die as a minion summoning Necromancer build, you just feel completely useless, and even if you were to resummon them quickly with Army of the Dead, they just get wiped out just as quickly. So personally for me, when I went into high tier dungeons that were a little bit too high level for me, I just found that my minions just could not keep up and they were just constantly dying and it was impossible to clear anything. And I didn't really want to play like easier dungeons. I really wanted to try some higher tier dungeons, so I decided to go for a more tanky build. Like I said, I went through a lot of trial and error with this build, but I finally have figured it out, and I honestly think that this build like just is so powerful and makes you so tanky. Like you can clear things so effortlessly. If you're the type of person that really does not like dying and you want to try clearing higher tier dungeons but they're just too strong and you get wiped out, then this is the build for you. Like you can see in the gameplay like how easy it is to play. You literally run into a whole pack of mobs, you cast your Bone Storm, and then you just spam your abilities from there. Like I was just rolling my fingers across all my abilities, making sure that I wasn't spamming my Decrepify too much because of the legendary item that we had, where we do more damage with the more resource we have. So we want to be having like 100% resource or essence. So yeah, that's pretty much all for the build. This is the most tankiest build you can go for Necromancer whilst also doing a lot of damage. Like I honestly think that this is the best skill combination to have for this build, and it cannot get any better than this. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. I really hope you try out this build. Let me know what you think about it, and let me know what your experience is with trying it in the comment section below. If you would like to see more of this content, then hit that like and subscribe, and also follow me on my Twitch channel where you can see me live. I like to play with my friends and experiment with builds, so come join the stream and say hi. And if you have any builds that you're curious about and want me to test out, let me know in the comment section below, or maybe check out some of my other Necromancer videos. Anyways, thank you for watching me, and I hope you have a lovely time playing Diablo 4. Bye bye!